And today we're talking with Army veteran Andrew Abrogast, founder of Arbos Cheese Dip. Andrew, you're an Apache pilot in the Army. So first things first, take us back. Tell us what you did in the Army.
Hey, thanks, Joe. Appreciate you having me on. And if my younger Marine brother was here right now, he would be you're on your side entirely and wouldn't give me any credit for being an Apache pilot. So kudos to you
Yeah.
as a Cobra pilot. But
What's your
um,
brother do in the Marine Corps?
he was is it 0311 infantry?
Oh, 300 infantry. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. He's
Full
just
metal
man,
jacket. Awesome. Hoorah.
stuck, hard headed, like fits the build of that, you know.
Perfect
So
man.
um, yeah, no. So I just kind of going back about the military experience. I'm from Memphis, Tennessee, and when I didn't have any family in the military, so it was kind of a new ordeal for me. And
Mhm.
it was around the time of 9/11, where I was still in high school, and going, knew I needed to go to college, wanted to go to culinary school, but I was kind of pointed towards a different direction to go to a university. And so I ended up going to Northwest Missouri State University, which I'm from Memphis. This is in Maryville, Missouri. I really had no business being there, but I shadowed the ROTC program with a buddy of mine who
Mhm.
was interested in doing it. And when I went there, met with them, I just immediately felt included and like wanted, right? So it's like, man, this is a good group of guys and gals, and they're genuinely interested in me. And so I ended up going when I started going to school there. They reached out and they're like, hey, we wanted to see if you wanted to come to PT one morning, and then man, it was history from there. I'm doing the ROTC thing, and I ended up doing I contracted my sophomore year and got a 3-year scholarship. And it was one of those things where it's like, yes, there was definitely some patriotism there that was pushing me towards wanting to do this, but obviously the scholarship and having a guaranteed job when I graduated was very enticing as well. So
Mhm.
just fast forward, we do our whole branch selection and ended up going aviation. And at the time, there was like this guaranteed branch ADSO, active duty service obligation. So it's like if you get your branch of choice, you're going to owe an additional 3 years. So long story short, I didn't read the fine print. I thought I owed like 6 or 7 years, ended up owing 10. And I didn't find that out until I was married and mentioned that to my wife in passing, and she wasn't very happy about that. But it all worked out in the end. So going from Missouri down to Fort Rucker, Alabama, flight school for 2 years. It was during the surge, so there was a large bubble of people, and just spent a lot of time doing odd details. So from there, platoon leader at Fort Riley, 1-1 ARB, and deployed to Iraq, and came back, career course, and then went to Fort Campbell, 101st, and served as a company commander there in the 159th Combat Aviation Brigade, deployed to Afghanistan. And then upon returning, I knew I was ready to get out of the Army, and I wanted to pick a location that would and a job that would be suitable for civilian transition. And so I chose a recruiting command. Terrible choice, terrible decision. And but it was in Savannah, Georgia, and so that's where I ended up finishing the remainder of my 2 years, and worked on my transition from there.
Yeah. You're back in the civilian world as a recruiter, but yet you're working like 80 hours a week or whatever. So not a whole lot of spare time to work on that transition. So as your time in the Army came to an end, what did your transition out of the Army end up looking like?
So, it was one of those things where, in recruiting, because you are non-deployable, they still work you to death, right? So
Mhm.
it's one of those like, hey, you could be deployed, so be thankful. It doesn't matter if you're gone from your family, weeks, nights, weekends, and stuff like that. So,
Mhm.
but I did know that as important as the mission was, the Army was not going to care about me when I ETS'd. And so it was on me to work towards this transition of what I wanted to do. And I was looking at, the federal route or corporate. And federal, I went through the FBI, the Department of State application process. I actually got pretty far. And then simultaneously, I'm partnering with, some of these military JMO, junior military officer recruiting firms, so like Cameron
Mhm.
Brooks, Alliance, and all those. And so they're helping me like learn how to talk corporate, resume building and everything else, which I would recommend to anybody doing this. Even if you're like not sure you want to go corporate, do one of these programs because they'll teach you everything. And then it's on you to either accept a job or at least take that information that you were fed and go find a job on your own. It's just going to set you apart from your peers. But then one of the actual options that really came to fruition was ACP, American Corporate Partners. They're a nonprofit that partners with major Fortune 500 companies, and what their goal is to create mentors for transitioning service members, enlisted or officers. It doesn't matter, active or veteran, doesn't matter. And so I went to ACP and filled out the application, and then you get assigned a mentor based on like your preference. Is it location? Is it, specific companies, specific fields? You put in a preference, and then they'll match you up with several, and you kind of get to pick which ones you want. And so I just got so lucky. My wife and I live in Memphis. We're from Memphis, and they paired me up with this sales director at International Paper, Jerry Murphy,
Mhm.
and his father served in Vietnam, and so he just was gung ho about helping veterans transition. And I mean, he gave me the world. Like, he was so genuine with wanting to help and setting aside time. I mean, this guy's traveling to, China, all
Yeah.
over the world for International Paper. But he's like very serious about helping me. I asked him 6 months into the 1 year program, Jerry, I don't I feel uncomfortable asking this, but I'm very interested in working for International Paper, and I would, love to figure out how to get an interview. And he was like, man, this is perfect because I wanted you to, but I didn't want to push you. And so he sets up like 7 or 8 networking interviews with like the top leaders in each group back at IP. It's supply chain, logistics, transportation, and everything. So I just get to go to Memphis. I meet with all these leaders, and then I get back to Savannah, and I've got a job offer. I didn't even apply. So
Dude, that is the
um,
way it's done right there, man. That's
it is,
awesome.
but it's like I had to focus sometimes during the day or at night on my resume, and building my skills and learning how to interview. It's like you
Mhm.
can't go in there and wing it. You'll, I mean, you'll embarrass yourself, and you're also gonna say, blame the system and say like, yeah, they don't support veterans. Like, no, that's not true. But you've got to put in the work if you want
Right.
to get the
Hey,
value out of that partnership. So
companies want to hire veterans, but they're not going to hire somebody that's not ready. So
that's right.
that part's up to you. And that's
Yeah,
it's a lot of guys get out of the military, they make that mistake. They think they're just going to have something handed to them, but they still have to do the prep work and
that's right. And
reinvent
get this,
themselves.
and also being in the military, you get we call them OERs or NCOERs. They're officer evaluation reports. You get them annually, right? You get rated and everything, stuff you remember. But I thought, hey man, I'm done with this. And when I was getting ready to go to International Paper, one of the guys I was going to be meeting with, was a former Special Forces major, and he asked for my OERs, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, man! Like I can't escape this system."
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I have I have a list of on my website, the veteranmove.com website. I have a list of 38 great entrepreneurship programs and resources for veterans and their families. A lot of most of it is entrepreneurship, entrepreneurship boot camps, things like that. But one of the ones on that list is ACP, American Corporate Partners. ACP, those companies like International Paper, they pay a lot of money to ACP for the privilege of mentoring someone like you. And your mentor from International Paper, here's what a lot of folks in the military don't realize. There's a lot of folks out there like your mentor at International Paper. They would love to mentor and have weekly contact with an Army Apache pilot. I mean, most people don't know an Army Apache pilot or whatever your MOS was. They would love to have a connection with a current military member that's wanting to come out in the civilian world and help. And that's what those ACP mentors do. When I first heard about ACP from a previous interview, I actually went and signed up just to see what it was like. And I was paired up with a gal from MasterCard. She was an executive at MasterCard. She was phenomenal. Now, I wasn't really looking for a job because I knew I was going back to my job as an airline pilot, but it was a phenomenal experience. I just wanted to see what it was like. And for 1 year, you get a free mentor and they will help you. And oftentimes, and they're not supposed to try to recruit you into their company, but often they're supposed to just mentor you in generally. But you oftentimes guys end up wanting to go work for the company where their mentors at. I mean, it definitely can happen. And it's a great thing. And ACP, they manage the program well. It's well run. I have nothing but good things to say about American Corporate Partners. So ACP, if you want a free mentor while you're still in the military, or if you got out already recently, get one of those mentors from ACP. It's a great program.
And that's the thing. It's like the onus is on you as what we as you're getting mentored, you're called referred to as the protege. So
Mhm.
it's there's mutual accountability for the mentor and the protege. But if you get paired up with someone and you learn, like 1 or 2 months into it that it's not clicking or you're not getting what you need out of it, you tell ACP and
Mhm.
they'll either find somebody else or fix the issue. And so that happened with me. And for the first guy I had, there wasn't any interest, and he was a veteran himself. And so I ended up getting moved over to Jerry with International Paper, and then
Yeah.
I'm like,
And
man, this
that's
is
what
perfect.
ACP is great at. They're great at monitoring. They're always checking in with you, saying, "Did you meet with your mentor this week? Did you meet with them? How many times have you met with them? Are you?" They're very
Oh yeah,
they lean forward on
hands
all that
on,
stuff. It's just a phenomenal program. But
and yeah,
so hey, hold that thought. We're going to
sure.
take a break. We'll be right back. Hey, we're back talking with Army veteran Andrew Abrogast, founder of Arbos Cheese Dip. So Andrew, you you went full, head over heels into corporate America, man. You were a coat and tie wearing corporate suit, all in, good to go, got that great job. Where did this shift where all of a sudden, because I know you said in your bio, you got bored with your career and all of a sudden you're like, I'm going to go into this entrepreneurship thing. What was that like? Where'd that come from?
Man, it was something I'd been searching for and didn't know it for a long time.
Yeah.
And the 4 years at International Paper, they were great. The pay was great, and I was getting promoted, but I wasn't happy.
You said they matched your salary. So coming out of the army, you
Oh yeah,
International Paper matched you. So you didn't have to even take a pay cut. So
no, I
things
didn't
are
take a
great.
pay cut and rapid promotions, and I mean like significant financial promotions. And so my thought was like, hey, I'll just keep making more money, and that'll
Mhm.
make me happier and happier. But it was the opposite, right? So it wasn't the company itself; it was just the corporate the corporate environment that I found myself like hitting a wall, and it happened during the pandemic where I'm like, I am not challenged enough, and I want to lead people, and it takes forever to get to that point. Sometimes depends on the company, but it was taking a long time for me, and I just one day woke up and was like, I'm gonna sell my dad's cheese dip.
This is the light bulb
And
just came on.
dude, that's how that's how people like, oh, this light bulb. Like literally, I just woke up and it was like, I'm gonna do this.
Gee, dude.
And I remember going downstairs that day and told my wife, I was like, what if I started a small company like selling dad's cheese dip? And she was just like, she's like, hey, that $600 bike outside that you rode once?
Yeah.
That's she's like, take, calm down. Yeah. So it
Emotion.
was just the idea was there, and I'm so passionate about food and helping others and just making people happy and bringing the best out of people. I think that's what the vessel was cheese dip, right? So I mentioned earlier I wanted to go to culinary school. I loved cooking. You asked me today if I like cooking cheese dip? Hell no. I'm so tired of it, but that's why I don't do it anymore. I have a co-packer that does it for me. But
Mhm.
even when I was leaving the military, you have two options. It's like you can take the courses that are more tailored toward resume, federal, and corporate, or resume writing with federal and corporate, or you can go to the entrepreneur training. And I skipped the entrepreneur stuff. I was like, I do not want to do that. Never want to do that. That's not me. And then here I am one day, and it took me like 6 months of doing this for me to be like, okay, I guess I am an entrepreneur. And it brought immediate happiness, and it brought a vision that I could see even though no one else could. And that is the moment. It's like the breaking point of, okay, if I am going to keep doing this, I have to believe that it is possible and not let any doubt set in from anyone else's perception, feedback, um, whatever, because you're going to come across people that until you make it, they won't believe in you. And if you let that hold you back, then you won't succeed. It sounds very simple, but that's what it is. So you're passionate about something. Like I found a purpose of what I want my life to be. And it was just doing this cheese dip thing. So it went from like, this was around January when I officially created an LLC back in this last year, January 21. And by March, I'm selling it through two local restaurants. Like they put it on their menu, and we called it Arbos. Wanted to call it Charlie's Cheese Dip after my dad, but
Mhm.
Chuck E. Cheese would have sued me, and so we landed with Arbos, and that was in March, and by May I developed this container that is, it looks like it should be in a nice grocery store versus just kind of a farmer's market
Yeah.
product, because I
Legit
wanted people
cheese
to
dip
take
container.
to take me seriously,
You can
So
see it on the YouTube channel if you go there.
yeah, and then
That's cool.
even after this one, it's like I learned the hard way that one product isn't going to make you successful, and so I came out with, two more. You need at least like three SKUs, what they say in
Uh,
grocery,
really.
to to enable a big Kroger letting you in or what have you. So, but from that moment in May, when I started selling it at one store, I went to 10. And then by August, I'm sitting down with my boss at International Paper and giving him the Dear John letter. Like, hey, I've got a moment to jump into this, and it's obviously not the best time. My wife was pregnant. We just moved. I started a business and I'm about to quit my job. But it's like, it sounds cliche, but when it seems the scariest, that's often when you need to do it, because there's never going to be a perfect time. And I will say this, I have no regrets for spending 4 years at International Paper. It
Mhm.
gave me negotiating, sales, logistics, operational, just all of this huge scope of knowledge that I acquired in 4 years that gave me the ability to do this, and also the money. I mean, so I started this business bootstrapping from my own money I saved from working in International Paper, right?
Yeah.
So there's several different ways. Not everywhere there's not a right or wrong way necessarily, but that's how I did it. And I wouldn't have changed that for anything because it allowed me to own my business versus, giving up all the equity right away. And so,
So talk a little bit about like your initial customers and initial growth. Like you said, you had it in a couple restaurants nearby and it just started growing from there. Was it like, were you like hitting, beating the bushes and hitting the streets to get it to grow? Or was it starting to kind of, grow legs of its own and taking off on its own?
it was on its own, and the power of your network
Mm-hmm.
and your, through social media, no one knew I was doing this. I mean, like very close friends and family. And then one day, out of nowhere, we create this social media handle called Arbos Dip, and we put it out there, and it's like now featured at Carolina Watershed and Zennies, and people are like, what is going on? Everyone, the whole city would, like, all of our friends, and word of mouth just spread so quickly.
Really?
And I had people showing up at these places that they would normally never go to buy it.
Okay.
And then I was selling it off of my doorstep, um, and which is not recommended. I was making it at the house at the time, but you got to start somewhere, right?
Yeah.
But eventually, it's like, okay, start cooking it in my friend's kitchen, his restaurant kitchen, and then I finally got a co-packer, someone that could make it for me. That way, I could focus on the business versus in the business, and
Mm-hmm.
run, get sales and everything. And I give him orders, and I'm in distribution by, it's like 9 months later after starting the company, I'm in major distribution covering several states. And then it just continues to grow and build. And, I was knocking on the door at Kroger here in Memphis for a long time, and they finally got tired of me, and they're like, okay, we'll give you 100 stores in 5 states. Initially, they said, we'll give you 40 stores in one state, but then, I guess they just liked me a little bit and gave me some extra. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so that was just here recently, right?
Yeah,
Kroger
actually,
deal?
yesterday was our official first day in Kroger,
Wow, that's awesome.
after about 6 months of ramping up and in preparation for that. And so it's
What's
in,
what's that? October 27th was your first
Oc-
day. Yeah.
yeah, October
Yeah.
27th, and we launched all over Tennessee, Arkansas, Alabama, Kentucky, and Mississippi.
Holy cow. And
But
so
the
what,
funny, yeah.
how many customers did you have before Kroger? And then with Kroger, what did it go to?
Oh man. So, the way I look at customers, it's business to business versus business to consumer. And
Mhm. Yeah.
so I had about 300 independent grocery stores before Kroger that I was selling to, and it covered, it really spanned about 6 or 7 states.
Wow.
It was so funny that we had this, living in Savannah, Georgia, Tybee Island is there,
Yep.
and there's this independent grocery that was in our distribution, and I reached out to them and sent them samples. I was like, "Hey, y'all can order this," and then they ordered it, and it's like my friends in Savannah are going to Tybee Island to get Arbos. It was so cool to see. Um, but so that kind of gave me the legitimacy getting into that
Yeah.
distribution. Then I could go to Kroger and say, "Hey, I'm in several states, and this is the product, and we really want to work with you on coming up with a partnership." And it just takes time. It's a big corporation, and I'm a small business, so it felt like an eternity for me.
Mhm.
But eventually they said yes. And while I was working on that, I get a call from this grocery chain in Texas, Central Market, which is owned by HEB,
Mhm.
and they heard about my dip somehow,
Really?
and they wanted samples, and then they got them, and then the next day they're like, we would like to order several pallets. And I'm like, oh my gosh, man. Like
That's
how
crazy. When you reach the point where you got major food chains calling you,
oh yeah.
something's going right.
I
Holy
didn't know
cow.
that. I didn't know it worked that way. I just assumed I have
Is
to
your
go
dad
beg
still around?
people. Yeah, he is.
I
He's
mean, he's got to be just over the
oh
moon
man,
about this.
he's so proud. And he's such a kind man. He helps me with everything, and he expects nothing. It's one of those where it's like, he'll do whatever I ask him to do, even though sometimes I don't like asking him to do it. And
Mhm.
he gets on to me. He's like, "You need to ask me," So, um, and so
Awesome.
he's helping just, small errands here and there, and my mom is as well. So I've got a lot of support here in Memphis that, couldn't do this alone. And
Yeah.
then all the different veteran entrepreneurial networks with like Bunker Labs and, of course, ACP at that point.
Yeah.
Um, Getting me here is just one of those where it's like, man, this is going so well. I'm almost worried that something bad is going to happen just because, it's like this doesn't work this way.
You ever go back to your ACP mentor at International Paper? You keep him updated?
Oh yeah. When he saw that I left IP, he was so happy for me, which I was worried because like he invested in me to get to IP for me to have a successful career. But
Yeah.
he's been a cheerleader for me, and all of my old, I have lunch with my boss from IP several times. So it's like I left on good terms, I think. And I still have this relationship with him because man, I love people. Like I really don't know how else to explain it. Like I just
Uh,
love relationships and networking and always wanting to help others reach their goals, and that's what makes me happy and keeps me going.
yeah. So as a military veteran, 4 years in corporate America, mostly based off of your military experience, what were some of your strengths that you would attribute your success to, and what were some of your blind spots? And when I say strengths and blind spots, those things probably that most veterans would be good at or blind to.
I definitely can give you some good stuff there. So one of the best things I think my own skill set was my ability to communicate and adapt. I went in there, I didn't have the high and tight haircut. I couldn't have had that anyway because I'm bald, but I didn't want to come off as being someone knowing that I was in the military because, right or wrong, there could be stereotypes, and I didn't want to jeopardize any potential relationships because of them knowing I was in the military. And it's just one of those. If a veteran has worked in a workplace before and was very rough and wasn't liked, I don't want them to associate me with that person because,
Mhm. Yeah, it happened.
But I had just the chaos from the military. It just gives you that advantage of things are just not that serious. And although they may be serious and you need to take them seriously, internally you don't process them that way. So it allows you to like accomplish tasks very quickly, efficiently, and ahead of your peers, right? So that's kind of where you set yourself apart. And I think it's just the leadership aspect. I actually figured out, like, one of my coworkers was very competitive, and I was always volunteering to take this or do this or go the extra mile. And one day he was like, "Hey, because I was in this training program, a leadership training program at the paper mill for a year." He's like, "Hey, this is just a training program. Like, you don't have to go and do all this." And you see right through it. It's
Uh,
one of those things where be humble, carry yourself, in a humble way. But in the end, you just have some work ethic that I don't know if we're cut from a different cloth or if it's learned or what.
yeah.
Um, but I'll say the blind spots were that you don't know what you don't know, and trying to learn. Man, I had zero business acumen. That was my biggest struggle. It's like learning what you know one day I raised my hand after someone was talking about P&L. I was like, "What is that?" They're like, "Profit and loss." Like, oh, you know. So
Yeah.
I think a lot of it is just going to take time to get to that point. But just as long as you embrace it and go in there with the right attitude, like you'll set yourself apart, and you're going to grow rapidly compared to your other peers in age.
Absolutely. That's awesome. I like to say the the way I would describe being in the military, it's almost like you live 5 years of experience in 1 year, or maybe 10 years of experience in 1 year. There's just so much going on, especially if you're, in an operational type job or incredibly whatever it is you may be doing. It's very fast paced, high tempo. You pack so much living and experience into a short amount of time. I think that's what gives people coming out of the military advantages. They've just seen a lot. And you mentioned the chaos. The veterans have the ability to see clearly through the chaos and find out what's really important here and zero in on the important things in the midst of chaos and in business that helps with gains leaps and bounds over your competitors oftentimes. So, hey, so Andrew, we are getting close to the end of our time. Unfortunately, I do want to give you the last word. If you're, first of all, before the last word, first of all, how do we find Arbo's cheese dip?
Oh, awesome question. So, if it's not in your state, it will be soon. But right now, if you go to www.arbosdip, ARB as in boy, OS dip.com, you will see a store locator if you plug in your zip code. Right now, it's pretty much all over Texas, Kentucky, Tennessee, Arkansas, Alabama, and Mississippi. And if you're in those states, plug it in the store locator and you'll see where you can find it.
Awesome. That's great. Well, looking forward to, someday I'm going to be walking through the grocery store. I'm in Florida now, but hopefully I'll be walking through that Publix and be like, hey,
Publix.
what's cheese dip? Man, that's awesome.
Oh, I'm coming for you.
All
Yeah.
right. I hope so. Yeah. I wish I knew somebody at Publix, but I don't. Anyways, help you out. So, if you're talking to somebody that's in transition on their way out of the military, they're looking to get into entrepreneurship, what kind of advice comes to mind?
So for those looking for an entrepreneur opportunity, don't become an entrepreneur just because you think that's what you want to do. If you're not looking at something that makes you happy and you're passionate about, it'll become just another job and you're going to end up quitting that and doing something else and then something else. I've met veterans that have three or four different businesses or have gone through three or four businesses because they're just continuing to strike out. If you're going to do this, be patient about it and make sure that this is something that you want to do. Or if you're undecided on it all, go get an education, go get your master's, or go get another job and save some money, and then allow time to give you that vision instead of rushing into it.
Absolutely. All right. Well said. Well, Andrew, thanks for sharing your veteran entrepreneurial success story. I told you before the interview, I love product stories because people can relate to a product. I mean, you got cheese dip. I took my dad's cheese dip recipe to the market and we're doing great. So I love, it's very relatable story, and the numbers and the growth through the grocery stores and everything. It's awesome. So
Thank you.
look forward to seeing your future success. Maybe we'll have you back on here in a year or so and check back in and see how spread out across the U.S. and everywhere else you are.
That'd be awesome. Thanks, Joe. I appreciate you having me on.
You bet. Glad to have you. All right. These two veterans are Oscar Mike.